told them that I will give you $30,000 if you basically let me test out the software for 90 days. Says done. And he had no choice because he was not doing that well in business anyways. So then here I was. I had check one. The first thing done to go and get this business started. And again, this is all in my bedroom, so it's not like I had entire staff looking at me. All right, let's charge. We're ready to go, right? This is like, all right, check one. Well, now what's next? So then I obviously, had puberty on my side, so I sounded a little more than a 16-year-old on the phone. And I started making a checklist of all the companies I would call. And I learned that a lot of this business happened on advertising agencies and so forth. So, call, practice my voice, practice my pitch, got my first phone call back returned 2 days later. And that was a deal that the next day appeared in my email box. I didn't even know what an insertion order was, but that insertion order was for $30,000. And this is partly I would say, timing-wise, this is when the internet was growing, so people wanted to advertise. I had a value proposition, and people liked it, and I was in business. And I never let anybody know, hey, you're talking to a 16-year-old with a $10 answering machine, So this was just perception is reality, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that as a key lesson that I use still today. So, struck gold, got my first deal, and then, started doing this, and, one deal led to another, and I learned the value of relationships. And that's one thing that I preach today, is that I never did this for the money. I made a lot of it, but I never did it for the money. And it came at the end of the journey. And partly what helped me is that since I was never distracted, that this is $30,000, I could go ahead and buy a lot of stuff. It basically allowed me to go to nurture and understand the elements of relationships. And I think anybody that wants to be in business and wants to be successful, and universally this applies to every type of business, is that you have to understand the value of relationships. Because if you can't, you're going to die. You're not going to be in business. Everything's about long-term, and you got to start that from the start. And fortunately, I learned that because greed was not on at least my mindset at that time. So, went to my parents, told them, here's my bank statement, freaked out. They thought I was doing some drugs or selling drugs, and, made them realize, all right, just yell. I just figured I'd just get them yelling out of the way, and after the yelling was out of the way, I'm like, okay, now I can talk. I'm not going to jail, and this is what I've been doing. And, my father and mother, basically, if you're Indian, you have two options. Be a doctor or an engineer, and that's it. Nothing else. Two options. So my brother, who's 3 years older than me, was great at math. I really knew he was going to be the engineer. And then there was me. And everybody thought, okay, he can at least be the doctor. Apparently, as much as George Clooney made it sound so cool on ER, I just did not have a heart for it. And, when that was probably the big shock to me, saying, how can we go ahead and get over that? And they got over it because they said, okay, you know what, we came here 12 years ago at that time, or 13 years ago at that time, to pursue a dream, and here's an opportunity our son has. He's making more money than we did in that 13 years in 3 months. So they'd be hurting themselves and holding me from doing something that could potentially lead to something far greater. So I think that was the key thing, where my father actually allowed me to drop out, and fast forward, I was able to go ahead and start the company, hired my brother, hired my sister as my first two employees, and again, that was pretty cool, The youngest of 4 siblings is the big boss now, and they got used to it. And still today, even my second company, I hired them, and most employees never really even figured out we were brothers and sisters, because part of business is you got to keep personal, relationships, emotions aside. Business is business if you want to survive. So, 2 years later, sold my company for $40 million. Didn't even hit me. Next day I woke up, went to work because I was like, all right, what do I got to do? I'm now the youngest executive in a publicly traded company ever. So again, I wanted to go ahead. I wasn't proud of that because nobody really knew my real age because I looked older. And but again, for me, it was determination to succeed and be ambitious and not to reminisce about the past, but march forward and continue to look at what was ahead of me. So I stayed there for a year and a half, got my first taste of corporate bureaucracy, not my thing, hit the exit button, and waited a year and a half till I could go ahead and start my next company. But the key lesson here, at least in my first company, is that one other key myth that exists is I didn't reinvent the wheel. I simply found something that captured my imagination, and I tried to do it better than the next guy. So I actually went into the business with intentions of a long-term business, and that was more important to me and to the business itself than the actual idea that I needed a business that was different. Because how many times have any of you guys been in a room when investors says, what makes you different? Right? And if you just say, oh, I'm going to be better than the next guy, they're like, yeah, right? I've been through there. I've had that rejection, but I guess even my second company is an example that execution is more important than the actual idea. So, Blue Lithium, my non-compete expires December 3rd, 2003. January 20, 2004, I started Blue Lithium, which happened to be the 5-year anniversary from the day I started ClickAgent, so kind of special. And after I started it, it was, again, another ad network. I had some ideas on what I wanted to make it different. I had some ideas in terms of what I felt that I could take it to the next level, but I didn't figure it out. I mean, if you asked me from day one, yeah, I'd be lying to you saying that I knew it was going to be a $300 million company. I'd like to think that I knew that it was going to be successful. I didn't know what amount it was going to attribute to, but I knew that there was nothing different about it from day one. I had ideas about it. So part of my idea was, let me just execute, get up to parity, then innovate, and then set away from the pack. And that's what I did with Blue Lithium. So one of the other key things I did differently is in ClickAgents, I raised no money. And in February 2005, I raised $11.5 million for Blue Lithium. And I never used it. So that $11.5 million actually converted into $100 million for my investors. So great investment for them. But the thing that I do attribute to it that it did give me, as far as the growth as an entrepreneur, the growth as a CEO, is the fact that it allowed me to think from a different angle. And what I mean by that is that when I interviewed someone, when I wanted to take risks, when I wanted to take the business to the next level, I never realized, how am I going to afford this guy? Because he's making $450,000 and he's the top sales guy for my competitor. I didn't think about that. It was more or less about, what is this guy and I going to do together? And are we a match? Right? So if he's worth $450,000 and he brings in $5 million for the company, I'll pay him any day. But before I didn't have that comfort, before I would actually worry about the dynamics that were the difference between comfort and discomfort. And that was discomfort for me because I couldn't pay $450,000. With that, we went to Europe. And in Europe, probably the biggest, greatest success for me was the day I left and said my goodbyes after I sold the company. My European team was 35 people. ClickAgents was only 34 people. So just my European offices beat my first company. And that was simply because of the fact of the risks, intelligent risks I was able to take. Did make some bad ones, but I did make the right ones, and this allowed me to do that. So we were voted top 100 private companies in America 3 years in a row. We got recognized as a disruptor and an innovator in the space by summer of 2006, and opened 9 offices, U.S., worldwide, European, offices in London, Paris, and Minsk. And then, I would say that, another lesson I'll talk about is your gut, right? And my gut said at that point that the market's consolidating. And since the market's consolidating, I realized that, okay, I got to go and do something about it. Because I saw all these mergers happening, and I had a constant struggle with my board. Because again, my board's trying to get used to a 24, 25-year-old CEO, 26 now, but they were trying to get used to is this guy making the right decisions, or is he dealing with emotion? I knew in the heart of hearts, I did not want to be in a situation where there was musical chairs and there was no chair for me at the end of the day. So I was able to push that, get the deal done, and now in retrospect, I'm the biggest hero. Because you know what? Economy is pretty bad right now. And timing-wise, we needed to get out of it. So part of it is timing and going with your gut feeling and getting that done. So we did a market check. Parties were interested. Yahoo eventually became the highest bidder and the highest deal for us, and we sold the company for $300 million. Stayed on for 4 months, and I got the famous 3-year non-compete again. So hence, with my time right now, I'm challenging myself to exciting projects. Finished my book, third time I'm plugging it. Secret Millionaire is actually a show that I filmed early this year. It's a great philanthropic show because I think that life is all about, if you have success, you want to share it, you want to inspire it, you want to give. give back to the community. And this was my way to go ahead and not only give back to the community, but also share a message that at a time like this, is still transcending that, we still need to give, and we still need to inspire and share to people in our society. So that comes out December 3rd in a couple of weeks, so hope to tune into it. Nationally airs on Fox in Canada, so you have no worries about this. I'm also working on a couple other entrepreneurial reality TV shows in India as well as in the U.S. So in 2009, going with the entrepreneurial business theme of how do you inspire and resonate and create a fun type of entertaining show that can solve all of that. So on an entrepreneurial angle, I'm working on a project called G-Wallet. It's basically trying to go ahead and figure out the supply and demand area of supply of merchants, demand of consumers. How do you go and fix that in an economic climate like this?